This is the Terracotta Army, 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago.
China's emperor lies buried, but scientists won't open his tomb. Why?
It sounds like something out of an Indiana Jones movie, but this is real. Buried beneath a hill in Xi'an, China lies the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang, the first ruler to unify the nation. And for over 2,000 years, it has remained untouched. Not because we can't open it, but because scientists are terrified of what might happen if we do. Why are experts still hesitating? What secrets were buried with the emperor? And what did ancient texts warn us never to disturb? In this video, we'll uncover the deadly truth about China's most forbidden tomb through historical records, cutting-edge science, and chilling evidence buried in plain sight. The emperor obsessed with immortality. Before his tomb became a symbol of ancient dread, Qin Shi Huang was a man consumed by one mission: to live forever. Born in 259 BCE as Yingzheng, his rise came during one of China's bloodiest and most fractured eras, the Warring States period. As the son of a prince held hostage in a rival state, his beginnings were marked by political schemes, secrecy, and possible scandal. Some ancient sources even whispered that he may have been the illegitimate child of a merchant, an origin so controversial it haunted his image for centuries. But regardless of his true lineage, Yingzheng's destiny would eclipse all others. By age 13, he was king. By age 38, he had conquered all rival kingdoms and declared himself the first emperor of a unified China, assuming the name Qin Shi Huang. His reign wasn't just marked by military genius, it was a masterclass in absolute control. He standardized currency, writing, weights, and measures across the vast empire. He connected the walls of feuding kingdoms into what would become the Great Wall. And he ruled with an iron grip, executing dissenters and burning books that didn't fit his ideology. Yet beneath this iron facade was a man deeply afraid of rebellion, of chaos returning, and most of all, of death. Qin Shi Huang did not believe death should be the end. In fact, he made it a national obsession to defeat mortality itself. He dispatched ships full of hundreds of young men and women across dangerous seas in search of Mount Penglai, a mythical island said to hold the elixir of life. According to legend, he even met a magician named Anqi Sheng, who promised him eternal life. But whether this man ever existed remains a mystery. The emperor made 3 pilgrimages to this region, each time hoping to return with the secret to immortality. He never did. Instead, he turned to the only thing within his grasp: alchemy. His court physicians and Taoist alchemists concocted potions that promised to extend life. Ironically, many of these potions contained mercury, a substance now known to be deadly when ingested over time. Qin Shi Huang drank these elixirs regularly, believing they would protect him from aging and illness. But what they may have done instead was poison him slowly, damaging his body and mind. As history tells us, with the advancing years, the emperor's fear of death became intensified. He began the construction of a vast underground palace long before his own death. This was indeed more than just a burial chamber. It was conceived to be a world within a world over which he could reign forever, untouched by time or decay. In a strange turn of fortunes, it may be that the very tomb he had fashioned, not by a clever spell or any mode of magic, but by the very thing that no one dares disturb, has ensured that he lives on in people's memory. His death left people reeling at the thought of losing their monarch in 210 BCE, during the king's eastern tour of China. This also sealed one of the most enigmatic tombs in human history. By then, tales of mercury, traps, and underground rivers had begun to circulate around. Now the very people he ruled over, terrified by his rule, began to fear what he had left behind, and so began the legend of the tomb, built by a man obsessed with defeating death, and sealed by the fear that he just might have succeeded. A tomb like no other in history. If you think of the pyramids of Egypt as marvels of ancient ambition, then the tomb of Qin Shi Huang belongs in a category of its own. Buried deep beneath a grassy hill in China's Shanxi province lies one of the most enigmatic and unbreached burial sites in the world. While the outer necropolis has been studied for decades, the emperor's main burial chamber remains sealed, untouched since the day it was closed more than 2,000 years ago. This was no ordinary royal grave. It was an underground kingdom, modeled to reflect the empire above. Ancient records, particularly those by historian Sima Qian, describe a subterranean palace that included towers, halls, rivers, and even the constellations above, recreated in glittering detail. According to Sima's writing, palaces and scenic towers for 100 officials were constructed. The tomb was filled with rare artifacts and wonderful treasures. But this isn't just poetic exaggeration. Modern archaeological surveys have revealed that the tomb complex spans over 56 square kilometers, making it the largest ancient mausoleum ever built. Construction began in 246 BCE, when Qin Shi Huang was only 13 years old, and continued until his death in 210 BCE. It is believed that around 700,000 workers toiled for nearly 4 decades to complete it. That scale alone is staggering, but what's even more astonishing is the level of planning and symbolism that went into the design. The emperor's tomb was built not only as a sanctuary, but as a sealed, mechanical reflection of his entire empire. Rivers of liquid mercury were set to flow through miniature landscapes representing the Yangtze, the Yellow River, and the seas that bordered China's domains. These rivers were supposedly powered by intricate devices, early hydraulic engineering or clockwork-like mechanisms designed to mimic the flow of water. Overhead, stars and celestial bodies were embedded into the ceiling to replicate the heavens, ensuring that the emperor would remain at the center of the universe even in death. And then there were the traps. Craftsmen were allegedly ordered to build spring-loaded crossbows, hidden throughout the chamber, and primed to fire on any intruder. According to the ancient account, they were designed to slay any who enter the tomb. Sima Qian writes that these weapons were strategically positioned to trigger upon the opening of doors or disturbances to the internal structure. That would make the tomb not just a symbolic fortress, but a literal death trap for the curious. Modern scientists haven't dismissed these claims. In fact, surveys using ground-penetrating radar and magnetic sensors have revealed anomalies beneath the mound, suggesting chambers, tunnels, and possibly traps, just as described. More alarmingly, soil samples taken around the tomb show exceptionally high levels of mercury, reinforcing the idea that those rivers weren't just metaphor, they were real, and still leaking toxic material thousands of years later. Unlike other ancient tombs that were looted or explored centuries ago, this one remains intact, not because it was forgotten, but because it was feared. The potential damage that could result from opening it, both physically and culturally, has paralyzed even the most daring archaeologists. Non-invasive technologies like muon imaging have been proposed, but no plan has been widely accepted or implemented. The risks are too high, and the consequences too permanent. It's an eerie feeling, knowing that the tomb sits right beneath our feet, perfectly preserved, its mysteries locked in stone and mercury. Every square meter of that underground world was constructed to intimidate, to mesmerize, and to protect. Qin Shi Huang didn't just build a resting place, he built a self-contained empire meant to survive time, looters, and even science itself. But surrounding this chamber is something just as strange and just as deliberate. An army frozen in clay, standing guard in perfect silence. The Terracotta Army, not just statues. It began with a broken piece of clay. In 1974, local farmers digging a well in the Lintong district near Xi'an stumbled upon what they thought was simple pottery. What they had actually found was one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. the Terracotta Army, a silent force built to guard an emperor's journey into the afterlife. What lay beneath their feet wasn't a simple burial site. It was a sprawling military formation, frozen in time. Thousands of life-sized figures, soldiers, generals, archers, cavalrymen, chariots, and horses, were arranged in carefully structured ranks across several pits. Each figure was crafted with an astonishing level of detail, with unique facial features, hairstyles, and armor. No two looked alike. These weren't mass-produced figurines, they were sculpted individuals, each seemingly plucked from the real Qin army and immortalized in clay. The sheer scale is mind-boggling. To date, over 8,000 soldiers have been uncovered, though many still remain buried. 3 main pits form the heart of the army's arrangement, and they span more than 20,000 square meters. Pit 1, the largest, contains the bulk of the infantry and chariots. Pit 2 appears to hold elite units and cavalry. Pit 3 may have functioned as a command post. Surrounding the warriors are clay figures of acrobats, musicians, officials, and exotic animals, suggesting that Qin Shi Huang intended to bring not just soldiers, but an entire court into the afterlife with him. But this wasn't a random flourish of artistic vanity. The Terracotta Army was strategically positioned in the necropolis. It lies to the east of the emperor's sealed tomb, facing the direction from which potential threats might come. The message was clear. Anyone who dared approach would first have to face an empire still standing guard. There's a chilling logic to it. In life, Qin Shi Huang feared rebellion, assassination, and betrayal. He built a massive security apparatus to protect himself. In death, he replicated that system in permanent form, enlisting artists, engineers, and craftsmen to create an afterlife that was every bit as fortified as his empire. Experts believe that many of the artists and laborers involved in the tomb's construction may have been sealed inside upon completion, either executed or left to die to ensure the secrets of the tomb remained buried. While there's debate over whether this legend is true, the Terracotta Army stands as undeniable evidence of the emperor's paranoia and his desire for total control, even in death. The craftsmanship also reveals something darker. The figures were once painted in vivid colors, reds, greens, purples, and blues. But exposure to air caused the pigments to deteriorate within minutes. That's one of the key reasons archaeologists have been so cautious about further excavation. If simply exposing the army's paint can erase thousands of years of preservation, imagine what opening the main tomb could destroy. And here's the twist that many people don't realize. Despite its grandeur, the Terracotta Army is just the outer perimeter of Qin Shi Huang's burial complex. The emperor's actual tomb lies several hundred meters away, unopened, untouched, and potentially filled with traps and deadly elements. The army was never meant to be the destination. It was a warning. To this day, many of the statues remain buried. Excavation is slow, and preservation techniques are still being refined. But what has already been uncovered paints a clear picture. This was not merely a burial site. It was an engineered reality where life and death blurred, a kingdom beneath the earth, enforced by silence, surveillance, and ceremony. Yet the silent clay soldiers are only part of the danger. What lies beyond them, inside the tomb itself, could still deadly. And scientists have every reason to believe it's not just legend, deadly traps and toxic threats. For most ancient tombs, the greatest threat is time. For Qin Shi Huang's tomb, it might be what time hasn't yet disturbed. Buried in the historical records of Sima Qian is a description that reads like the blueprint of a nightmare. He wrote that the tomb contained palaces, towers, and replicas of the empire's great rivers, all surrounded by lethal booby traps designed to cause death. This isn't the invention of modern myth. These warnings come from ancient China's most respected historian, writing just over a century after the emperor's death. According to his account, the tomb was rigged with mechanical crossbows, poised to unleash a volley of arrows at anyone who entered. These weren't ordinary weapons. Engineers of the Qin dynasty were known for their advanced use of tension-based devices. If even a fraction of Sima Qian's description is accurate, the tomb may still contain spring-loaded traps that could fire bolts the moment an intruder triggered a pressure plate or opened a chamber door. While many experts believe wood-based mechanisms would have deteriorated over the centuries, there's still a real concern. What if they used bronze or another corrosion-resistant material? This is no idle speculation. Preservation conditions inside the tomb are unknown. If the chamber was sealed airtight, it's conceivable that some materials, even organic ones, could have survived in a dormant state. And if those traps still work, opening the tomb wouldn't just destroy history, it could end lives. But that's only half the danger. The other threat is invisible and much more real. Ancient sources mention a key feature of the emperor's tomb: rivers of mercury, used to simulate the Yangtze, the Yellow River, and other great waterways of China. It sounded fantastical until scientists started testing the soil around the burial mound. Modern geochemical studies have revealed extraordinarily high levels of mercury, far above natural concentrations. A 2016 study showed mercury levels hundreds of times above the local baseline. A 2020 report even suggested that mercury gas may still be leaking from within the tomb, slowly rising through cracks in the earth. Mercury, even in small quantities, is toxic. In vapor form, it can attack the lungs, nervous system, and brain. Prolonged exposure leads to neurological damage and death. And if the tomb was truly filled with rivers of the substance, possibly thousands of liters, the risk of release isn't just academic. It's a potential environmental disaster, one reason scientists are proceeding with extreme caution. In recent years, archaeologists have explored using non-invasive techniques to probe the tomb's interior. One of the most promising is muon tomography, a method that uses cosmic ray particles to create 3D images of underground structures. It's like an advanced X-ray that doesn't require digging or drilling. While early results have hinted at large underground chambers consistent with Sima Qian's description, the data is still incomplete, and Chinese authorities have not approved any intrusive investigation of the burial mound. Part of the hesitation is technical, but part of it is cultural. In Chinese tradition, tombs, especially imperial ones, are sacred spaces, not to be disturbed. Opening the tomb prematurely could be seen as both disrespectful and dangerously foolish, not just scientifically, but spiritually. So archaeologists wait. Scientists monitor mercury levels, and the tomb sits sealed under earth, its contents untouched. Inside may lie priceless artifacts, perfectly preserved murals, or even texts long thought lost to history. But guarding it all is a lethal legacy, a trap-laden monument to a ruler obsessed with control. And while the tomb remains closed, its most disturbing whispers are already rising from the soil, from the air, and from the texts warning us not to enter. Still, what kind of man would order such a tomb, where even death wasn't safe? The answer lies in the man himself, the ruler who conquered not just lands, but minds, the ghost of historical mistakes. To understand the scale and secrecy of Qin Shi Huang's tomb, you have to understand the man who designed it, not with blueprints and bricks, but with ideology, paranoia, and unrelenting ambition. Qin Shi Huang wasn't just a ruler. He was a revolutionary, a conqueror, a tyrant, and in the eyes of some modern scholars, a misunderstood visionary. Born as Ying Zheng in 259 BCE, his ascent was shaped by betrayal and manipulation from the start. His father, Prince Yiren, was a political hostage in the rival state of Zhao, and his mother was rumored to be the concubine of a wealthy merchant named Lu Buwei, who may have orchestrated Ying Zheng's rise to power. Some historical accounts even claim that Qin Shi Huang was not a legitimate heir to the throne, but the illegitimate child of a merchant. a theory that casts a long shadow over his quest to legitimize and centralize power. Regardless of his parentage, once Ying Zheng assumed the throne at age 13, he ruled with brutal efficiency. He eliminated political rivals, centralized authority, and by 221 BCE had unified the fractured Chinese kingdoms under one empire. But he didn't just want to rule a nation, he wanted to reshape civilization itself. With his trusted chancellor Li Si, Qin Shi Huang standardized nearly every aspect of life across China: currency, weights and measures, axle widths of carts, and even the written language. The goal was clear: erase regional differences, destroy the old, and replace it with one uniform system: his. The emperor believed that loyalty to family, clan, or former state would breed rebellion. So he replaced local hereditary rule with bureaucratic governance, appointed by the central court and loyal only to him. He was thorough and terrifying. The emperor feared that the past might inspire dissent. So in 213 BCE, he ordered the burning of books, especially those that contradicted his regime or promoted Confucian ideals. According to later sources, hundreds of scholars were buried alive for defying this order, though some historians now suggest they may have been alchemists or court tricksters rather than actual philosophers. Regardless, the message was unmistakable: dissent was treason. He ruled with an iron grip, but he was also driven by fear. Fear of death, fear of disloyalty, fear that everything he'd built would vanish the moment he was gone. And that fear helped shape the mausoleum he spent nearly 4 decades constructing. Qin Shi Huang's obsession with immortality wasn't limited to his physical body. He wanted to immortalize his empire, his ideology, his reforms, and his vision of total control. His tomb was designed as a mirror of his world, where order would remain eternal. The rivers of Mercury symbolized the great waterways he'd conquered. The Terracotta Army reflected his real military. The booby traps, poisons, and elaborate seals were all extensions of a mind determined to remain unchallenged, even in death. His death in 210 BCE was shrouded in secrecy. While traveling on his 5th imperial tour, he reportedly succumbed to illness, possibly the mercury-laced elixirs meant to preserve him. For 2 months, his courtiers hid the news, carting his rotting corpse back to the capital, disguising the smell with barrels of dead fish and forging royal edicts to maintain the illusion that he was still alive. That's how tightly he held power. Even his death had to be choreographed. And yet, for all his fear and cruelty, Qin Shi Huang laid the foundation for a unified China that endures today. His reforms, his roads, his vision, they outlived him. But so did his secrets. Because locked inside his tomb is more than treasure. It holds the mind of a man who tried to defeat time itself. And perhaps no story reveals his grip on fear more than the assassination attempts he barely escaped, each one closer than the last. The man inside, Qin Shi Huang's violent legacy. Power invites enemies, and Qin Shi Huang had many. The more he conquered, the more death surrounded him. The more control he enforced, the more revenge he provoked. For an emperor so obsessed with immortality, it's telling how close he came to dying at the hands of assassins, not once, but multiple times. The first and most infamous attempt came from the state of Xi'an in 227 BCE. At that point, Qin Shi Huang, then still King Zheng of Qin, was deep in his campaign to unify China. Xi'an, weak and on the brink of conquest, made a desperate move. Crown Prince Dan of Xi'an devised a plan to send a gift to the king, a map of the Dukang region along with the severed head of a rebel general, Fan Wuji. But hidden inside the map case was a dagger. The assassin, Jing Qi, posed as a diplomatic envoy. When the blade fell out and Jing lunged forward, King Zheng barely escaped by running around a pillar, struggling to draw his sword, which was too long to unsheath quickly. Palace protocol prevented guards from carrying weapons in the king's presence, so only a royal physician managed to intervene, striking the assassin with a medicine bag. King Zheng finally drew his sword and slashed Jing Ke, ending the threat himself. The plot failed, but it left scars, emotional and political. 5 years later, Qin conquered Yan completely. Crown Prince Dan was executed. Then came Gao Jianli, a musician and friend of Jing Ke. He planned a second assassination. Though blind, he used his fame as a musician to get close to the emperor, performing in court. His instrument, a ju, a type of Chinese lute, had been modified with a slab of lead, turning it into a weapon. But before Gao could strike, he was recognized. Qin Shi Huang, intrigued and perhaps arrogantly amused, spared his life but blinded him to prevent any further threat. Still, Gao continued performing. Then one day, the emperor let his guard down. As he approached to praise the performance, Gao swung the weighted instrument. He missed. He was executed on the spot. Another threat eliminated, another layer of paranoia added. And yet, the danger didn't end there. A third attempt came in 218 BCE. This time, it was orchestrated by Zhang Liang, a surviving noble of the defeated Han state who vowed revenge. He hired a strongman assassin and crafted a massive 120-catty metal cone, roughly 160 pounds. The plan was daring: ambush the emperor's traveling entourage during one of his many inspection tours. Hiding in the mountains, the assassin hurled the metal cone at the royal carriage as it passed. It struck with tremendous force, but the emperor wasn't in that carriage. He had cleverly created identical decoy carriages, a strategy that likely saved his life. The assassins escaped the immediate manhunt, but their failure only confirmed Qin Shi Huang's deepest fear, that someone, somewhere, was always trying to harm him. These close calls weren't just footnotes in history. They shaped the emperor's worldview, hardening his already authoritarian tendencies. They justified his draconian laws, his constant surveillance, and his obsession with secrecy. His campaigns for unity became more brutal, his personal life more isolated. He even began constructing a vast underground tunnel system connecting his over 200 palaces, allowing him to travel unseen, hidden from both human enemies and evil spirits. Each failed assassination gave him more reason to seek immortality. Each betrayal drove him further from the living and closer to the elaborate death chamber we now know as his tomb. It's no wonder the emperor designed that final resting place to be impenetrable, lethal, and surrounded by stone-faced guards. He had stared death in the eye and knew it would come again. So he created a place where even death would need permission to enter. However, while the traps and tomb remain hidden, scientists continue the hunt for safe ways to unlock its secrets without unleashing disaster. What happens if we open it? The tomb of Qin Shi Huang has stood sealed for over 2,000 years, not because it's been forgotten, but because it's been feared. The moment scientists discovered what might be waiting beneath that burial mound, mercury rivers, spring-loaded crossbows, irreplaceable artifacts, the question stopped being, what's inside? And became, should we even look? The debate today is a complicated one. On one side are archaeologists desperate to unlock one of the last great unopened tombs of the ancient world. On the other are preservationists and scientists warning that any invasive move could result in irreversible damage to history, to the environment, and even to human life. So far, no one has dared crack open the central tomb chamber. But modern technology has made it possible to get closer than ever without disturbing a single stone. One of the most promising tools in this effort is muon tomography, a scanning technique that uses subatomic particles called muons created by cosmic rays to penetrate dense objects. It's the same technology used to look inside Egyptian pyramids without opening them. Applied to the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, it could give researchers a 3D model of the inner structure, showing chambers, tunnels, and possibly even traps or anomalies in the soil, without ever lifting a shovel. Preliminary tests have already been promising. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys have detected massive underground structures consistent with Sima Qian's descriptions, possibly the artificial rivers, palaces, and mechanisms built within the emperor's burial site. What's astonishing is that these scans seem to confirm that the tomb remains entirely intact, a rarity among ancient burial sites, which are often looted, collapsed, or degraded. But the more scientists learn, the more dangerous the site appears. High levels of mercury vapor have been detected in the soil directly above the tomb, far beyond what would be expected from natural deposits. A 2020 study confirmed that the toxic metal is likely leaking from the sealed chamber below, potentially from mechanical systems still in place and slowly breaking down. These findings aren't based on legend or speculation. They're scientific data, matching Sima Qian's ancient descriptions almost exactly. Mercury was once believed to grant immortality, and Qin Shi Huang consumed it regularly. It now seems he may have been buried in it too. Even if archaeologists find a safe way to enter, they face the possibility of triggering centuries-old traps. While many assume time would have rendered these useless, there's evidence that some of the weapons, if made with bronze or preserved in oxygen-free environments, could still function. Ancient Chinese engineers were capable of astonishing precision. Their devices, simple yet effective, could still be lying in wait, armed and deadly. Cultural beliefs fuel hesitation. In Chinese tradition, disturbing an emperor's tomb is taboo. Scholars warn that rushing in could spark political, spiritual, and cultural backlash, pointing to past mistakes like the destructive 19th century dig at Troy. So the question lingers: how do you explore the unknown without destroying it? How do you balance historical discovery with respect and caution? For now, the answer is patience. Scientists continue to refine non-invasive tools, while mercury levels are closely monitored. The tomb remains closed, but not forgotten. It sits beneath that quiet hill in Xi'an, untouched not because we can't enter, but because, in many ways, we're still not ready. And maybe that's exactly how Qin Shi Huang wanted it. A man obsessed with control, legacy, and eternal life, still shaping our actions from the grave. The door to the tomb hasn't opened, but the warnings have. And some believe that's the final message. Disturb this empire, and it will defend itself. Qin Shi Huang built his empire on power, paranoia, and permanence, and in death, he may have succeeded more than any ruler in history. His tomb remains the most forbidden place on earth, not because it can't be opened, but because we're afraid of what happens if we do. Is it a masterpiece of ancient engineering, or a deadly trap waiting for a fool to spring it? If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's darkest mysteries, like this video, subscribe for more shocking deep dives. And don't forget to check out the video on screen now, because some secrets go even deeper than this one.